Republican Congressman George Santos of New York is now facing criminal charges. Sources telling CNN's Evan Perez that federal prosecutors have filed charges against the New York freshman and serial liar. He's expected to appear in court as soon as tomorrow. Let's bring in Evan Perez, who's breaking the story for us. Evan, tell us more. What do we know about the charges specifically?
Well, Jake, right now, we do not know the exact nature of these charges. We know that these have been filed under seal with the federal court in the Eastern District of New York. That's, of course, the court that has jurisdiction over Representative Santos's district, which is in Queens and Long Island. We know that at this point, he's expected to appear in federal court to answer these charges in Islip tomorrow. That's as soon as tomorrow in Eastern District of New York. Now, again, we don't know the charges. We know that the Justice Department, Public Integrity prosecutors, the FBI, of course, prosecutors there in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn have been investigating the congressman for a number of allegations, including charges or claims, rather, that he falsified some of his campaign finance filings. And so those are among the things that we expect prosecutors may be able to shed some more light on when we see these charges finally announced tomorrow. Now, this is a congressman, obviously, Jake, that you've talked about many, many times on this program. He took office just in January, and in just a few months, of course, it's come to light a number, just a stunning number of falsehoods and lies that he's told as part of his campaign, in the lead up to his campaign, and in the years prior. I'll just recite just a few of them, including his claim on his resume that he worked at Goldman Sachs and Citibank. He said that he was a star volleyball player for Baruch College, where he said he got a degree. None of those things were true. He claimed, obviously, that also that he had Jewish heritage, something, again, that has been shown to be false. And, you know, the congressman has repeatedly said that he is not a criminal, that he's not been charged with anything. We do know, though, in recent weeks that he did admit to a fraud charge in Brazil some number of years ago. Jake?
Yeah, Leslie Jones once said on The Daily Show, do you know how much you have to lie to be known as the lying congressman, which says something. But, of course, lying to the public is not necessarily against the law. Some of the allegations you're talking about, obviously, are including campaign finance violations, potentially, allegedly, and fraud, stealing from that veteran who had the sick dog. Has Santos or his legal team, if one exists, responded to your reporting?
We reached out to George Santos's lawyer this afternoon. He declined to comment, said that he's not going to comment on any of these allegations until he sees fit. We did see our Capitol Hill team, Manu Raju and others, saw him walking the halls earlier today. He did not tell us anything about what his plans are for travel to New York tomorrow. But again, that's where we expect that he's going to be able to answer these charges for the first time, Jake, in the Eastern District of New York.
Let's bring in CNN's Manu Raju. Manu, Santos also under investigation on Capitol Hill before the House Ethics Committee, but of course that's a rather toothless organization, generally speaking. This seems more significant.
Yeah, no question about it. And also it'll be interesting to see how Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker, responds to this, because for some time he has not called on George Santos to resign, in large part because if Santos were to resign, this would open up a special election in a district that Joe Biden carried in 2020, something that could potentially flip to the Democrats and narrow Kevin McCarthy's already razor-thin majority, which is why McCarthy for some time has said, let's let the investigations play out. He has pointed to the House Ethics investigation as one in which he'll ultimately decide on how to respond to George Santos, whether he would call him to resign, saying, let's see what the House Ethics Committee comes up with. We do know that the Ethics Committee is pressing ahead with this investigation. How long that they'll come to reach any sort of conclusion remains to be seen. But now that he has been indicted, George Santos, the question will be whether that changes the leadership calculation at all, whether Kevin McCarthy will come out and call for George Santos to resign. There are rules within the House Republican Conference that for any member who has been indicted, they automatically lose their committee assignments. Recall, though, earlier this year, Santos ultimately voluntarily stepped down from his committee assignments after discussions with McCarthy. So whether there'll be any other punitive measures remain to be seen. Also uncertain whether Santos will try to fight this in court, whether he will try to run for re-election. He did announce just a few weeks ago he planned to run for re-election despite the mounting opposition from Republican leaders back home, and also many within his own conference still said that he would try to fight and try to win this electorally. Will that change his mindset now that he has been indicted? All big questions, but also the big question for the speaker: what will he do about this controversial member who has now been indicted within his conference, something that can narrow his majority if he were to step aside? All big things that will certainly be on the speaker's mind and Santos's mind in the days ahead, Jay.
Well, I think you answered your question in it, but I hear what you're saying. Let's bring in former federal prosecutor Elie Honig. Elie, how serious of a legal case could this be?
Well, Jake, I guess that'll be the big thing that we find out tomorrow when we take a look at this indictment. Important to understand, it is not a crime to lie to the public. It is not a crime to lie about what you're going to do when you get in office. It's not a crime to lie about your background. What is a crime, however, and what might be the case here, we don't know, is to lie in your Federal Election Commission filings, to lie about your campaign expenditures. And you'll recall there was reporting that George Santos's campaign claimed this whole series of expenditures for $199 because the limit over which you have to detail those expenditures is $200. I think that was awfully suspicious. So I'd be looking for some sort of official false statements charge here. Again, we're speculating, but based on what the public reporting is.
CNN chief legal analyst Laura Coates is also joining us again. Laura, sorry, I thought you were going to get the hour off after all of our Trump conversation, but now we have another legal matter dealing with a different lying New York politician. How is this going to play out in court when Santos appears as soon as tomorrow? Obviously, we don't know the charges, but walk us through the choreography, if you would.
Well, first, we're going to know more about the actual charges, if it's sealed, of course, if it's what they're going to actually release to the public, and what a judge would know about an arraignment, and whether this is going to be a multiple indictment or one or more. Remember, you can oftentimes amend an indictment to include more offenses later on. There might be conversations already about the grand jury testimony that came in, if there was a grand jury impaneled in this particular matter. And we're going to learn more about this, frankly, likely as George Santos does. But as Elie articulated, the nature of the charges, the number of the charges might not be known, but certainly the substance of what we know to be the underlying cause for the investigation has been quite clear. And if you follow the trail of money, the idea of thinking about whether transparency and accountability can be actually served for the electorate, that's going to be the key for any campaign finance or election-related matter. What was known, what was relayed to the public, and did the electorate have a meaningful opportunity to elect a candidate of their choosing based on verifiable, truthful information? We take election-related matters very seriously in this country because we want to have that level of transparency and accountability and the access to having someone you want in office. And remember, Speaker McCarthy was very reluctant to say what they would do about this seat, trying to kick the can down the road to suggest that if there was a crime that occurred, then they would take action. Well, if the domino begins to fall and the charges come in criminally, the question I have is how will this actually manifest politically? And for the questions, the reasons that Evan said, the idea of having an open seat in this instance, when you had the potential for a Democrat to come in and claim it, is going to be quite odd in this new Congress.
And Elie Honig, I think I know the answer to this, but can Santos serve in Congress as this legal case proceeds? And can he serve in Congress if he's convicted?
He can, Jake. The only way to get rid of a member of the U.S. Congress, the House or the Senate, is by expulsion. Now, the Constitution tells us that that requires a 2/3 vote of that body. So you would have to see Republicans join with Democrats to do that. There have only been 5 members of the U.S. House ever expelled in the history of this country. 3 of them were Confederates, former Confederates, shortly after the Civil War. The 4th was somebody from Pennsylvania, from outside of the Philly area, who was expelled in the 70s to the 80s. And the 5th was a congressman named James Traficant who had been convicted of a crime. So there's going to be a big question here for Kevin McCarthy and other Republicans, which is now that we have reporting, and we'll see tomorrow, that George Santos has been indicted, are you willing to allow him to keep on serving?
Who was the one from the Philly area? Was that Ozzie Myers?
Michael Myers,
Michael
I think
Myers.
was the name. Ozzie Myers, yes.
Yeah, that was my congressman, man. I know that. That's in Philly. That's not outside Philly. That's in Philly. We're proud of our boy. He's in prison again for a different offense, by the way.